met a young lady. They had a vision of heaven, and they met a young lady. And they asked her they asked him, how did she look? This young lady had died of cancer. And said, how old did she look? And she said, oh, she looked about 29. And when her friend heard this, her friend started crying. And she said, I was sitting with her when she was sick with cancer. And she said, I wonder how old I'll look when I get to heaven. She said, I hope I look like that picture right there. She said, I was 29 there, and I looked my best at that year. Amen. I believe everybody's going to be right around that age, 29, 30 years old. Amen. For eternity. Amen. Forever.
Isn't that wonderful?
Amen. It is wonderful.
Can't wait.
I've shared with you before, but if you forgot, there's a book by Richard Segman. I ordered it on Thrift Books about a year ago, and it's called My Time in Heaven. This was a man that in the 1970s he had a car accident and was killed instantly. And he went to heaven, and everything he says I have heard other people say bits and pieces of, but this man was in heaven for I think 8 3/4 of an hour or something like that. And he was actually dead for that whole time. And they had taken him to the hospital, and they were wheeling him down to the morgue when the Lord put him back in his body.
Ain't that wonderful?
Wow. And he tells stories after stories of what he's seen while he was in heaven. And the whole time in heaven, they were leading him. There was an angel that was leading him and taking him to the throne room. And he says, but everywhere he went, there was things that was, sidetracking him. He happened to walk up to his grandfather's mansion. And he said he's seen from a distance his grandfather sitting there on his front porch. And he's seen there was mansions that were being built. He says, why are they being built? He said, because they're being prepared for those that are coming. Amen. And they would call the actual name of the person that house was going to be for. Amen. And he said, and I seen Jesus in the distance. And he said, and then suddenly he was right next to me, talking to me. And said, but the whole theme was, come on, we have to go on to the throne. Every time he would stop to check out one scene and check out one house or check out someone he had known from earth, the angel would say, yes, we must go now. They're waiting for you at the throne. It was really, it was the most powerful book I've ever read. And I recommend it. Richard Segman, My Time in Heaven. I recommend that you buy it. You can get it from Thrift Books for like $3.75. And if you order at least $10 worth of stuff, they give you free shipping. So it's well worth the price. I got addicted to that book site. I have more books than I have room for in my house. I was talking to Brother Glenn Garland down in Ashland Camp, and he was talking about how he had some issues in his life that the Lord told him, says, put away your past. And he said, I had 1,000 books. He said, I love books. He said, I had 1,000 books. And he says, and I felt the Lord tell me, give them away. He says, so I gave them, he said, I donated them to the camp library. And he says, and I was counting my books the other day, and I realized in just a short time, I have over 500 books already. God's replacing them. Amen. And they put him in charge of the bookstore down there. So he started ordering books where they have instead of, just like small volumes, they have maybe, in one book I bought from down there, has 7 different books by M. Bounds on prayer. 7 books on prayer. Amen. It's that thick. Then there's another one that has 4 books about Smith Wigglesworth. Yeah, this one I have one too. This one here has 4. I haven't read it yet. I'm still working on 3 other books. And I have about 3 others that I've started and haven't finished, so I'm gonna need more time to read. Man, you got to pray for me. I won't have to work. I can read more. Amen.
Amen. Praise the Lord. You know, too many, or what Tim was saying, you know, we're all going to be in heaven, you know, and all our loved ones that passed on, they're going to be there to meet us. Amen.
Yes,
You know, that we will have a new body in Christ.
yes.
And you know, I often like to quote 2 Corinthians chapter 5 in the passage where it says that we will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ, which it does. But for those of you who don't know the context of that chapter, I'd like to read it to you. Amen. This is a simplified version. It says, this is 2 Corinthians chapter 5. If you'd like to follow me along, just listen to this promise that God has given us. Amen. It says, "For we know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down, that is, when we die and leave this earthly body, we will have a house in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God Himself,
No.
and not by human hands."
Yeah.
Hallelujah, I feel the glory of God.
Yes.
I'll read it again. "For we know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down, that is to say, when we die and leave this earthly body, we will have a house in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God Himself, and not by human hands. We grow weary in our present body, and we long to put on our heavenly bodies like new clothing. For we will put on heavenly bodies. We will not be spirits without bodies. While we live in these earthly bodies, we groan and we sigh. But it's not that we want to die and get rid of these bodies that clothe us. Rather, we want to put on the new bodies, that these dying bodies will be swallowed up by life. God Himself has prepared for us for this, and a guarantee He has given to us by His Holy
Yes.
Spirit.
Yes.
So we are always confident, even when we know that as long as we live in these bodies, we are not at home with the Lord. For we live by believing and not by seeing. Yes, we are fully confident, and we would rather be away from these earthly bodies, for then we will be at home with the Lord. So whether we are in these bodies or away from these bodies, our goal is to please Him. For we must all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. We will each receive whether we deserve for the good or evil we have done in this earthly body.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes.